Hello, everyone. Well, this is the first lecture in the criminological theory course. So, this writing that you're doing um, is about rational choice, deterrence, social learning, routine activities theories, classical theories of crime. One of the things that I want to go over exactly is what rational choice is and what classical theory is. Classical theory is based on like a cost benefit analysis, if you want to look at it that way. So if you ask someone why they do or they don't do something, okay, they'll give you reasons, and sometimes they'll do a cost benefits analysis in their own head. And that cost benefits analysis, it's a good way to say it. It determines if they do something or not, for lack of a better term. And well, let's give an example. Okay, the classic rational choice model says that a criminal will commit a crime if they are motivated to do the crime, there is something worth taking, suitable victim, and there's nothing stopping them from taking it. So what they called this is they call this routine activities theory, and all it is if you look at the white sheet here, is the triangle, okay? And in this triangle, you have three things going on. You have exactly what I described here. You have a willing offender. These words might be different than what's in your textbook, but they mean the same thing. I'm mostly just going off my own knowledge here. So, willing offender. Okay. A suitable target or a victim. The victim can be a person or otherwise a thing or an animal or whatever, right? It doesn't matter what it is. Something that the offender wants to interact with. And then we have a lack of a guardian. Lack of a guardian. Now what routine activities theory says, which is what this is under classical theory of crime, this is called routine activities. It's in your book too, and it's one of the better examples of classical theory. It's saying if all three of these exist, then a crime will occur. So bam, we get a crime. And if any one of these three are missing, let's say that we're missing the lack of a guardian, in other words, the guardian's present, okay, then the offender will see that the guardian's present, and they will not take the target or attack the target or hurt the target or whatever the target needs to be done by the offender. If there is no offender, then obviously it doesn't matter that there's no guardian, and the target's fine no matter what. If there is no target, it does not matter if there is a willing offender or a lack of a guardian, because the offender has nothing to really interact with. So if all three of these things are present, though, a crime will occur, according to the rational choice theory, according to routine activities. So let's kind of dig into that cost-benefit analysis of what that actually means. It's saying that, hey, if the crime is worth it, then someone will do it. If the crime is not worth it, then someone won't do it. That's a very simple way to put it. So let's move from routine activity theories to, where is this? Moving over to what's called deterrence theory. And deterrence theory is still used today. I mean, so is routine activities theory, but the way you want to think of these classical choice theories is they're not really used in active theory. They're more like subsets of learning theory, okay? So we'll get into learning theory when we get there. So classical theory became a major trend across criminology, sociology, law, and political science. It's rooted in economics, as you see here. There's a cost-benefit analysis, like I was saying. In expected utility models, and it views crime as an outcome of a calculation made by an offender or a criminal. And it goes, like I said, argues that the threat of punishment can discourage crime, which moves us into what is called deterrence. And deterrence is practice. What? I guess my marker's not. Oh, that's Tracy. Deterrence. So we got deterrence here, right? What deterrence theory states is if there is a big enough punishment attached to a crime, people won't do it. Well, as you know, that's not very true. But you have two types of deterrence, right? got your primary deterrence and you got your secondary deterrence. Your primary deterrence is the punishment extracted upon the person that prevents them from doing the thing. The secondary deterrence is that old thing where like the teacher punishes the whole class so that, you know, one person doesn't do something. So I'll give you an example. Primary deterrence, that is what happens when you're driving down the road too fast and a cop pulls you over and gives you a speeding ticket. Okay, so does that ticket deter people from speeding? Yes, no. There's an if there, okay? So it determines if someone will offend or not based on if a cop is present. So if a cop is not present, back to that lack of a guardian concept, right? Then people will speed on and zoom by and they don't have to worry about a ticket. Now if the cop is present and they pull somebody over, what ends up happening is the person gets a speeding ticket and they stop speeding for about 10 days, 15 days, and then they kind of forget about it, they go back to speeding again. This is how deterrence theory typically works, even though this is not what the theory says it works. This is one of the reasons why it's more of a learning theory kind of thing, and we'll move on. But this is one of the first theories. John Locke, etc., were built upon it. On Crime and Punishment is a text famous by this. So, that being said, secondary deterrence is the death penalty. The death penalty is not really worrying about if the offender reoffends, because primary deterrence wants to make the offender not offend again. Because again, if you got the speeding ticket, now you know the punishment. You know the punishment hurts. Why would you speed again if it cost you $500, $1,000, or whatever? Especially if you're poor. And more on that. There'll be more on that as the semester goes across, because deterrence theory typically targets poor people harder because it attacks resources as a punishment. $500 is a big deal for someone that's got $1,000 in the bank. $500 is not a big deal for someone that's got $1 million in the bank. So the punishment hits a little differently depending on your social class. But that's more conflict control theory, and we'll get into conflict control theory. But this is rational choice. So rational choice and deterrence are not full theories of crime with that, but they're rather subsets of that broader theory of social learning theory. We'll get into social learning theory again too. So rational choice assumes individual weighs costs and benefits, okay? Deterrence theory focuses on fear of punishment, certainty, severity, and swiftness as the key factors of preventing crime. Certainty means the punishment is certain to happen if you commit the crime, okay? Severity means the punishment has to be severe enough to warrant that someone not want to do the crime. In this case, you could argue that a speeding ticket is not severe enough to prevent speeding. Could be, could not be. And then swiftness, the action has to be taken quickly before the deterrence has an effect on the outcome of recommitting, or what we call recidivating. It's called recidivating, recidivism. And recidivating and recidivism essentially means just recommitting the crime after you've been punished for it once. And you'll see recidivism rates in data banks all across while you're studying crime. So they share a utilitarian foundation and often overlap in explaining those criminal decision makings, as seen here. So let's kind of get into back to that death penalty again. Okay, research shows, and this is a genuine research on secondary deterrence, that if you kill somebody, if the state kills somebody for murder, let's say they did murder, so they give a public execution in the form of lethal injection. Well, again, they're not too worried about the person recommitting because they're not going to recommit, they're dead. But what the actual strategy behind the death penalty is not only it takes out the person committing the crime originally, but it's supposed to have a deterrence effect on the people watching and the people that are aware of the death penalty itself. They say that, the murderer, in this case, the punishment should be also being dead, and it's severe enough. But research does show that, let's say, we'll take Texas for example, okay, that if Texas executes somebody, crime goes down for about 3 to 4 months, and then after that, it goes back to the previous levels that it were before the execution occurred. So again, we have some fleeting deterrence happening from the speed tickets and from the death penalty itself. So there's a fleeting effect, but it's not permanent. And that's kind of like the weakness of a deterrence theory and rational choice theory and all those nice things. So these are just what you call classical theories of crime. So, the criminologists like Cornish and Clark, they describe criminals as reasoning decision makers, but the acknowledgement of decisions are bounded by limited information and situational constraints. In other words, the criminals are not all knowing to all the things that are going on in the cost benefits analysis. So, that being said, how can they make a rational choice if they don't know all the information? So, research shows, and again, that legal punishment alone has weak effects on behavior. Informal sanctions and reinforcement from peers often have stronger influences than formal punishments from the state. And then social learning theory explains this better because it incorporates all those sources of reinforcement and punishment, not just legal deterrence. And again, we'll get into social learning theory when we get there. So, moving that, right, we got rational choice. It's okay, but it reiterates what social learning theory already offers. Social learning provides, instead of rational choice, comprehensive behavioral framework, integration of cognitive, moral, and social dimensions, and stronger empirical support across diverse crimes. So, what's going on here is rational choice and deterrence theories aren't necessarily wrong, but they are incomplete. By situating them within social learning theory, criminology will gain a richer and more accurate model of how people can learn to commit and refrain from crime. And that's kind of like the quick and dirty on chapters 1 through 3. I'm going to give out an assignment, and I'll post that on Canvas. And thank you for attending the quick and dirty for this time.